Oh, good. Cool. Well, welcome, Chastity,
Thank you.
to Dissonance Sessions. We're talking about where mental health and music collide.
And I would wait for the sun to come up. You're like the sun, yeah.
So I want to start with your roots, musical roots, and then kind of talk about your evolution as a musician or as an artist and how you frame that through the lens of mental health and or how they intersect
Cool.
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can we start with the roots?
Yeah. You know, it's funny to me because I always say a few very specific artists. But when I think about it, that's not true at all. Like I'll often say Nina Simone, Van Morrison, but those memories come from like age 20. So what I've realized lately, like thinking about my childhood, like my sister was listening to all the R&B, like Luther Vandross, like just like sexy, you know, woo you kind of soul. My brother was listening to straight on like metal rock and southern rap. And I'm the baby, I should point that out. And prior to that, going even further back, which is not a memory I have, but certainly feel that it's been infused in my system. My brother has a great memory. My father passed away when we were kids, and he was a musician. And he said that at studio sessions, I would lay under my father's piano with my hands and feet, like.
Wow.
And that image is like, I'm so thankful that my brother remembers those kind of things, because when I think about that and like him playing with his like blues jazz band and knowing how I can sit now for hours and just soak up music and like what was my young mind like. So the roots are like all these little moments along the way, like falling in love with Dolly Parton's voice when I was like a teenager. And I don't celebrate Christmas, but I love Dolly Parton's Christmas record. I remember hearing Dave Matthews when I was a teenager and had been playing the acoustic guitar. So I think that was also like Dave Matthews and Lauryn Hill. So I feel more expansive now with my influences. I used to consider myself a roots musician. Now I've been obsessed, like roots and like connected to the blues lineage. And then now I'm really curious about if those are my roots, then how have I bloomed out of that? In what way am I different from my father and not just like, yeah, I'm doing my father's music, which I loved for a long time. And now I just feel drawn to other blossoming aspects of my roots.
Well, and roots spread.
Crap. Sarah. Yes. You know when something like seems so like duh, like that I never even thought of that. Oh, that's good. Thanks for saying that.
There's so much growth underground.
Yeah.
That you can't, maybe you don't see it,
So true.
but it's there.
Cool.
Yeah. I like that idea of having there's so many different influences and these moments that you remember. There's something visceral in you, even if you don't mentally recall being under your dad's piano.
Yeah.
Your body knows it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And those are my musical influences. As soon as I was saying that about laying under my father's piano, one of my favorite authors, Carson McCullers, wrote a handful of books, but her most famous one she wrote when she was 25 and in a lot of physical pain, essentially in a hospital. And it's called The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. Just fascinating Southern Gothic novel. So good. I think the premise is about the failure in communicating when you're like really trying and you know that just how that feels. There's a moment in the book where the main character, this 13-year-old girl, grows up in a poor family, and she at dinner time when people are playing their radios or whatever the phonograms, she goes under the bushes by their windows and listens to the classical music. And Rachmaninoff comes on, and she is so blown away by it. She starts like clawing at her arms, and it's just like this private moment of this kid that everyone thinks is like the tomboy, rough, mean, whatever, and then she secretly is like floored by classical. And Carson's writing, James Baldwin's writing, Octavia Butler's writing, Louise Erdrich's writing, they really influence me in my hope of making sense and telling a story that feels honest and simple. There's a simplicity about the way that those authors write for me that it's simple yet profound. So yeah, that's what I think about when roots. Yes, I was born in Claremont, New Hampshire.
Okay.
Where like my mom's whole Irish side of the family, tons of aunts and uncles, and my 2 older sisters still live there. But then we moved to Tennessee when I was 7, to West Tennessee, and so I was raised there. And I hated that until I left and like moved here. Like I was always like, F Tennessee, whatever. And then now I'm so grateful for that. Like, I'm country. Like, I'm a city queer Black woman, but I'm country, you know.
You can embrace that part of you now?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're proud of it?
I am. I'm proud of, I mean, I don't know if I would say proud is not what comes to mind, but I feel a part of that type of slowness.
You can say more,
Slowness
about
of
that.
Southern culture.
Okay.
You know, I mean, my family gets on to me because there's nothing to do in the town where I grew up, and yet I'll be, you know, try to go, and city life. And just the pace of life is slower.
What brought you to Minnesota?
A whim, literally. A friend of mine in Knoxville. So I grew up in West Tennessee, went to seminary. We can talk about that if we want.
I was going to say.
Time out. Went to seminary, got kicked out, and then moved back home for a minute and then moved to Knoxville. And a friend of mine there, after 4 or 5 years of living there, was like, I'm moving to Minneapolis. I'd never been like further north in the Midwest than Chicago. I knew nothing about this place. I'd never heard Norwegian as like a identifier of like American culture. And then that's been like 14, 15 years ago now.
So I think, you know, when we talk about mental health, and it's a process, and I always like to think of how we all have mental health to some degree at any given point, right? And it changes just like other parts of our health. So when did you first kind of become aware of having it or mental health being part of your awareness?
When I moved to Knoxville, that friend group really shaped me. Up until that point, I was religious and then had left religion and then was like, who am I, floating around. And I met some folks who I experienced being loved by, just in spite of our differences, and so I started encountering people who cared for others differently and would express their internal experiences. And so I think in those ways, like without having the language for it, like, no, how are you really?
Yeah.
That was beginning to happen in my friend group. And so that was an insertion in me, but of like, oh, you can go deeper in sharing your experiences. And but as far as mental health as it pertains to care, awareness of development, triggers, I'd say it's like the last 4.5 years of going to therapy. In the beginning of going to therapy, I was like, this is the last resort for a fucked up person. Mm-hmm. Fucked up because a relationship had failed, or ended, not failed. It actually was a loving departure towards the end. But nonetheless, it threw my balance. And
So you got curious about yourself?
not yet.
Oh, okay.
I mean, maybe curiosity from a perspective of compassion, but it really was like, I believe these things that this person said in anger about me, and I don't want to be that way. Then after a few months, I was like, oh, wait. And I started learning about just how the brain develops, how you learn habits, how you learn how to build relationships, and those times in your life when you're learning that. And I was like, this starts to make sense for me in the way I respond to stress, to confusion, to pain, to anger. And that's when I started to get curious and really fascinated. Mm-hmm. It helped for me, from my therapist, to have some real scientific, it brought me so much relief to be like, oh yeah, your brain was wired that way. And through acknowledging, I can get like crazy anxious when nothing has changed. Or maybe in a conversation it will just start to creep up, and I had to, or it helps for me to just say, well, because maybe you're feeling what's going on?
Yeah.
Maybe you're like, maybe I'm worried about my face, or aesthetic, or whatever. I feel like I'm getting off topic. Not
That's okay.
off topic, but like I'm wandering.
Well, it makes me want to ask another question, which
Cool.
is like, what do you feel when you have those moments of something is off, or I'm starting to notice something, this discomfort that maybe before you didn't even notice, and so it would turn into all this anxiety. Mm-hmm. What's that like, or what is it? What are the cues? What does your body tell you, or what do you start to think?
If I really don't like something, if I feel really uncomfortable, my stomach will just start to hurt. And then I can give myself permission to just say, something is too much. I might not be able to identify it. So sometimes it does appear in my body. I'll go, walks are my fucking genie in a bottle. A walk is just, nature I find to be just like, in a way, my witness. Like, I get to witness nature, and then I feel like a lot of my spirituality is connected to nature, so that's also why I can have a spirit of trust when I'm out on a walk, and can just like know that my brain is trying to work as I'm doing, like if I were just on an airplane, I would do this or tap my feet, and I forget what the bilateral, whatever, you know what I'm trying to.
Well,
there's a terminology.
Bilateral movement, you're engaging both sides of your brain, and your thoughts and your feelings can integrate.
Yeah. And so I'll say that out loud to myself or to the pup, like, I'm feeling confused, I'm feeling angry, I don't know what, but let's take it for a walk.
Yeah.
I think it's also, I tend to be, for any extreme emotion, I usually get quiet. There were people in my life in the past who were not very accepting of that. And now I've realized it's just a part of my disposition. That's just, I want to think about it. And I'm kind of slow. Like, sometimes it takes me a week or two to be like, oh, that's what I was feeling. Mm-hmm. And then it, so I just try to be patient with myself. And
so you can say like, there's something up I'm going to try and figure that out or let it unfurl and
Yeah.
I'll know.
Yeah.
How do you make sure you have people in your life who can hang with that?
I've had to be really direct. When I started going deeper in therapy, I realized I couldn't do it alone, and I couldn't have these very private, vulnerable moments without sharing with my friends. I feel like therapy is just such a tool to, I don't know if I know myself better. Maybe I do. But I certainly like get these washes of joy, which were a total fucking surprise to me. I've never considered myself a joyful person until the past couple of years. I actually had resolved myself to be like, my heart was broken at such an early age. This is who I am in the world. And now I don't feel that way. So that's cool. That's fucking amazing. What a surprise. So just to say, like, yes, I like have a joy badge, but it's not always like on, or even it's sometimes there's stretches where it just doesn't feel available, and there's sadness and there's hardships and friends and family members of mine that it's like there's no fighting how truly sad and dark certain things are in the world.
So when we talk about mental health, I think we can't leave out of that all the different things that influence who we are, how we become. Right? So living in Minneapolis the last couple of years, being in the pandemic, living in the midst of the place where George Floyd was murdered, Dante Wright, so many others. It's really been where things are sprouting from in a large way with regard to race and police violence, and it's a lot to live within. And I'm wondering, how have some of those uncertainties, like what does that do to you as a person living in this time?
I think it's a wild journey when you start to have a sense of yourself, your body mass, the space you desire. When you feel a type of connection to our culture, to not a monolith, not a group of people that are exactly alike, but when you walk by in this street, we have a head nod. When we're in a grocery store, a music venue, any space of gathering, thousands of people, we have this secret way of acknowledging that's very private, that no one even knows about, really. And it's like beautiful. This like, we don't know each other, but yet we're connected, so I'm acknowledging you. And when there are hardships, when there are murders in your community, and yet you're having to either, for us the past couple years, survive, navigate, thrive during a pandemic, but then you are also experiencing atrocity that has compounded upon itself. So it's like you're trying to take care of yourself, you're trying to take care of your community. Sometimes it feels like just a constant, like, you know, when we talk about joy, like joy sometimes feels like, you know, it's like it almost feels nearly impossible for the the way society has been built for like marginalized people and black folk and brown folk and indigenous folk and queer folk. I had to take and still am, I've taken a large break from social media after the uprising. Because I just, more stories were, continue to come out of harm that has been done to people that, Breonna Taylor is an example of that. And I just can't handle it. And in those ways, when I want to have fun, when I want to feel sexy, when I want to be joyful and clown around, it almost feels like the bigger fuck you than anything to societal oppression. One of the lines in a song of mine is, I've got joy even when I'm a target. And what is it in the psyche of a human being to have to make all these, I'm constantly making decisions with regards to my safety everywhere I go, every day that I leave my home, or even when I'm just in my home by myself, I'll go through what would I do if someone came in, specifically trying to cause harm because they're racist or whatever. I go through these scenarios everywhere I go, just in case, I need to literally physically fight to stay alive. It's been wild trying to explain to friends in other parts of the country what it's been like living in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Because my block is gorgeous. My neighbors are, it's diverse, multi-generational. There's kids running about, there's cool gardens. And 4 blocks away is George Floyd Square. And so that complexity and what it's like to water down your fence, talk to your friends about go bags, who has access to get out of town. The levels of privilege that I have as a light-skinned Black woman walking through this world. There's a lot of things that I think about when it comes to identity in my community, of the people who live there, but the people whose values I share, true abolitionist, who have changed my friends, this community in Minneapolis, the queer Black community, has linguistically affected the world. To say abolish the police, holy crap that phrase exists, in a, speaking of how a root system spreads from at the beginning of the conversation, and it spread like that.
You talked about having big emotions. We're talking about a wide range, which is a completely normal human experience. And I think there's sort of this pursuit of joy and welcoming it in your life, but how do you make room for everything? And is there to you, maybe we can look at, there's not such a thing as bad or good feelings.
Yeah.
But how do you make room for all of them?
That's a great question. Which I think is maybe a question meditation in a way of I can only answer that for today. And then tomorrow it might be new things that help me make room. Part of making space is acknowledging that voice of me or whatever who tells me all these shoulds. You should be happier today. You should have finished that it's just so constant. And there's been a couple moments recently where I could work through the well, of course I was on a walk. I was working through the shoulds, and I was just like, I'm just going to walk. Like, first of all, that's where I am right now. Mm-hmm. So any of the half of the shoulds aren't even possible right now because I'm walking and I'm not at a piano. I'm not on the internet. Like, and that's been, again, like, when joy comes, sometimes I'm so surprised. And in that moment of saying, letting go of shoulds, I had like this moment of like, holy crap, I think that was peace. Like, holy crap. Like, it felt like it was a shooting star in a way. Like,
Yeah. It surprised you.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you're seeking joy, finding opportunities for peace.
Yeah. Which has been wild. My peace was really challenged, like, of course, in the beginning of the pandemic when it was just utterly terrifying. And then also, you know, a few months in, I finally realized, oh, my job doesn't exist. And at that point in time, 4 or 5 months into the pandemic, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just write and record.
Sing to the Walls. It's a title song, the new album. And I need to know whose walls you're singing to the walls. Are they yours? Are they collective? Are they someone's walls?
Yes and yes and yes. There's a part of it that's really literal from the pandemic. Like, there is something with regards to this gift in terms of maintenance and also in terms of my practice, which is like singing if no one's there. So there's that part of it. Like, okay, this is what the world is right now. And then the other part, or another part, there's a song by Coldplay on one of their records called Rush of Blood to the Head. And it's always stood out to me. And the sentiment is, I'll go to the place where the bad thing happened to you and burn it down. I've always wanted to do that. As I've become more familiar with my anger, I realize like that there's residue to that action. For me, maybe not for other folks, you know.
To the burning it down?
To the burning it down. Of like, in particular, more specifically in his song, he's like, you know, I'm going to get a gun, I'm going to start a war. So anyways, the song has always inspired me as like, just, I get what he's saying. If I can't burn, like, you know, physically burn it down, I'll sing to it. I'll do the thing in hopes of offering something to this.
That's so powerful. It's you're willing to be in the shit and be in people's pain or in that most vulnerable place.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you really love someone, you are just like there, you know, and if you could do something, what would it be?
I will sing to these walls. I will sing to the stars. If it lightens you up, I will sing to your heart. I will sing to your heart. And I will sing to the moon. I will sing to the rain as it's falling at night. I will sing it for you. I'll be singing, I'll be singing. I will sing to those walls, hope it gets through. I will sing to your scars, they need healing too. I will sing to those walls, hope it gets through. I like to scoop you up, and we could go for a drive. You know how I like my car. You know how I love your eyes. I will sing to those eyes. And I will sing to those walls, hope it gets through. And I will sing to your scars, they need healing too. I will sing to those walls, hope it gets through. I hope it gets on the day that you called my name. I got up. On the day that you called my name, I got up. I got up. On the day that you called my name, I got up. Oh, and I will sing to these walls, hope it gets through. And I will sing to your scars, they need healing too. And I will sing to those walls, hope it gets through. I hope it gets
There's something about this song and another song on the record titled Gertrude that calm my whole nervous system. The whole palette, the way there's just this like ease. In that way, it was like, I'm so curious about this for myself. Like, when I sing something that I need, it becomes just this balm. There's a lot of moments of expressiveness and passion and anger and love and sexiness. This song does get sexy, and that's also what I love about it. It's like, you know, let's get all healed up. Let's get our ointments going. Let's get relaxed. Let's get relaxed.
You find comfort in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It just is, it brings such a ease.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So you spent a lot of time writing the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. And what came out of that?
Tons of weird shit. When Prince passed, it really, like, especially learning all the hundreds and hundreds of songs that we never even knew about. I was just like, how do you do that? And of course he's Prince, yes, but he still showed up to do it. Mm-hmm. It didn't just like,
right.
You still got to clock in. And I feel like the last 3 years, I've finally started to understand that phrase for artists, like of showing up for it. And so part of my writing thing has been to do something. I feel fortunate that I play different instruments, and so I can kind of go with the vibe. Like if guitar is the thing, piano to me the last year and a half has been my real way of expressing, and I think it's also because of the way it reverberates back while I'm singing.
Maybe it has to do with those early memories.
Crap, maybe.
In your body.
But yeah, even at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was like, oh, okay, I have nothing else to do, I was like, then the world is my oyster. Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to learn recording independence. And Greg, my drummer, who runs a studio, was a big part of that. And like, because I found myself like really working on a record. Because up until last year, I really just, or I guess a year and a half ago, I was just like, I'm going to just keep writing and writing and writing and not make songs fit together in a family of music, but just keep writing until some of them naturally do. So I ended up having a good 10 different drafts of what I thought was an album. But to achieve that during the pandemic, I needed to learn some little things with running a studio, and particularly the independence I needed was like my main instrument is my voice, and so being able to record that and having those couple tools just like set me on the things that are on my new record I've never done in a studio. Like once I started getting the vocal dialed in, then I was just like, oh, I can like just actually arrange, like create parts, like things that I would normally hire other people to do. I kind of would think like, how would they do it and create that? Before the pandemic, I did think I was finished with a record. I had recorded a whole chunk of songs in Stockholm, Sweden with the drummer Brady Blade, and he produced the session. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like, half of these songs make no sense. Like, who cares? Like this. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things still after over 20 years of singing and writing songs that I'm curious about and that I want to learn. And writing is like, as a musician, is a way that I can learn things and like synthesize them and see if it comes out. It's a whole different side than the performance. A lot of critical thought, which is of no use when you're actually singing the songs to people. So by the time these songs have gotten to the listeners, when this record comes out in the summer, I put songs through a lot of scrutiny. And this process was a little bit different in that part of the scrutiny was just throwing a new song on stage and getting very instant feedback from an audience. Like, if it's fast and groovy and they're not clapping, I'm like, well, well, in Minnesota, folks don't really clap, but yeah, it's been a journey.
You got engaged in your music in a whole different way, it sounds like, with producing and recording.
Yeah. a friend of mine halfway through was like, why are you doing all this? Like, just get someone else to do all these things. To poke at him, he's a male. And he's one of my closest friends in my life. But I felt that to be a pretty masculine perspective, because other men in the music business that do a lot of things, people are usually like, whoa, look at all these things this dude did. And then a woman is doing a lot of things. Well, why don't you just get someone else to do it? And so initially that was part of the thing, but also I can't even describe, like, this is my attempt to describe what I hear in my head. I play with some of the most talented musicians. Like, I am in awe of the folks I play with. And to this wild extent, they are, when I'm writing a song with them, they are amplifying my intentions. But in this process, on this record, I amplified my own intentions. And all the textures have very specific meanings for me. And it's cool to, like, for me, I describe this as a body of work. And that might seem like 1920s-ish, but that's how I think about it.
You sound very empowered.
Yeah.
So with a song like the Sun, so much of your music points to love, it seems, lyrically.
This record's a love record, which I've never written before.
And Like the Sun is very much a love song. Summer love.
Oh, summer love. Very much, once again, homage to Prince, like hoping that I impress him. When I first started writing that song, it was a good 6-7 months of sitting with it. I'd never played the piano like I did on that. And I just was like, I have no idea how to sing on top of this. Like, this is really cool, but it just was so different from anything. I did a writing session in LA with Dan Wilson, and at the end of our session, I played him the piano part, and I was humming along, and I just was like, dude, this piano part sounds so amazing. I have no idea how to sing on top of it. And he was like, if you like it so much, just sing what you're playing. Like, sing those notes. Da, 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 ba, ba. And that was the permission or little nugget of curiosity that I needed, because when I went home that weekend, this song started coming. Like, woke up from a crazy dream. And then the chorus, that's what I hope Prince is like, okay. It just is like, the timing of it is everything about that song is so lifting and exciting.
I find joy in that song.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love playing it. Sometimes, it's just such a groove. Like, Greg and I played it in Chicago at the Hideout, and at a moment I was like, I feel like Tori Amos. Like, you know how she starts to, I don't know if you, I'm like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, that song gives
Full
me my,
body.
like, Tori Amos, like, fucking get it.
Woke up from a crazy dream last night. You were in my arms, sleeping by my side. You pulled me from a dark, cold space in my mind. Yeah, this love's the warmest thing to find. And I would wait for the sun to this heat was full on, and we back through the city streets just 'cause I kissed you on the lips that night, oh love, and I got home, the sun was coming up. And I would wait for the sun to come up. Hey, hey. You're like the sun.
Something we talk about in Dissonance a lot is the dimensions of wellness. And physical and mental and emotional, spiritual and social wellness are all parts of that. And they all overlap in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. What are other ways you take care of yourself?
I'm at a place in my life where I'm like integrating my needs.
Yeah.
And part of my needs are the boundaries that I create. And I've had help doing that, like, you know, with like my publicist or things like that, of or even with my therapist, because sometimes I say shit on stage that I'm like, I haven't even said that in therapy. Hold on, y'all. We're gonna just play the next song, and I'll save that for my therapist. But let me write it down right quick, because it's really fucking interesting what comes out of me sometimes. But from that, my therapist and I worked on, like, you know, being honest in the way that I want to be, but that doesn't mean I have to, like, just like,
Right.
know the audience and know, like, all the markers that feel good for me.
Yeah, you got to know your protective factors too, and what's safe. Yeah. Well, thank you for talking to me about this.
Yeah.
Talking to me in general.
Did we do it?
I think we did it.
We did it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate
It's
it.
a gift for us to be with you.
I had a dream. I was cold in rain. Was floating between all around my head. I could not grace take a hold of anything. Seemed like letting go was the only way, only way. Yeah, oh, did I wonder, but I do not know if it ever show, ever show, ever show, ever show. Down West River Parkway, behind the old boat. There's a corner just over there. It is hidden low, hidden low. Oh, how